Hey guys, Automated Garage back today. What do you say, Gary? You don't say nothing? All right, guys, Automated Garage back today working on this really nice looking Excursion back here. You like them Excursions, Gary?
Yeah.
It's a 03. It's already been bulletproof and everything else. So customer called me. He was out of town pulling his camper. Said, hey, it's cut off on me a couple times. It'll crank back up, run for a little while, dies again. Had it towed here, dropped it off at the street. I drove it up here. I could not get it to repeat the problem. So then I hooked up Auto Ingenuity. I ran a self-test. Let me show you what we got right here. So we got our Auto Ingenuity open here. We're doing our key on engine running self-test here. We're gonna initiate it. That's what happens every time. It either dies or almost dies, and we get the p2617 insufficient engine speed decrease or increase during self-test. So what I'm thinking is cam sensor, possibly crank sensor, either or. A lot of times with these, it's more gonna be a wiring problem than not. But before we tear into a wiring harness and we start checking the wires out and checking for continuity and everything else on it, easiest thing to do, especially on the cam sensor, is just pull it out and swap it out. I have a known good cam sensor here, so we're gonna show pulling that out real quick, swapping it, see what happens. If we have the same repeat, then we're gonna go after the wiring harness. This just eliminates messing with wiring, cutting wires and all that to replace this cam sensor first. Let's see what we got. All right, so we're going after the cam sensor, which if you look right there, there's one bolt and one electric plug right there in the side of the block. I'm gonna zoom in. It's that little bolt right there. And the plug is right there above it. So we're just gonna unplug it, pull that bolt, pull it out, throw the new one in, plug it back in. We're gonna give it a try, see what happens using this other spare one that I have sitting around. And then if that's not it, we're gonna go after the wiring. All right, so to get this out, you got your 8mm bolt. This is the combination I used to get it out. What is that, like a 3-inch and a 1-inch extension and a deep 8mm. So break it loose with that. But before you break it all the way loose, you gotta get your plug undone. And what I did to get the plug undone is you come from the back side actually. If you reach up over the engine cradle right here, reach up here, you can feel the plug on the top. You can squeeze it and pull it off a lot easier. If you have smaller hands, it doesn't matter. My hands won't fit up there from the front. So unplug it that way, and then you go on and unbolt it and pull it out. And you're gonna have to turn this ear just a little bit to get it to clear some of those power steering hoses over there. And then pull it out, and then it'll be the reverse, putting the new one in. So let's throw the new one in. All right, we got the new sensor in. I'm gonna wash my hands so we don't get this nice, pretty Excursion dirty. Give her a start, we'll try the self-test again. If the self-test pass, we'll drive her and put her through her paces and see what happens. All right, so we had the same result running our self-test on the truck with my spare cam sensor in there. So now I have a spare crank sensor. A lot of people think the crank sensor is such a pain in the butt to replace. It's behind the air conditioner, but I'm gonna show you. Now, granted, this is a lot easier with the lift here, but I'm gonna show you that it can be done without taking the air conditioner off. It's not that big a deal. I'm gonna swap it out real quick. And like I said, all we're doing here is eliminating a wiring harness problem. If this fixes it, then we know we don't have a wiring harness problem. If it's the same thing, then we can delve into splice into a harness or buying a whole new harness or whatever. But that's way more expensive than doing these sensors, so, and way more time consuming. So let's pull this sensor off too. Change it out real quick with a known good one that I have and see what happens. All right, so I'm gonna try to get y'all a shot of this. So that is your crank sensor right there. I'm gonna zoom in again for you so it'll focus. That's your crank sensor. Same thing. So we're gonna, I'm gonna show you a couple things we can take off right here with not the air conditioner, but to get to that one. All right, so all I did to make getting to this easy, took this nut off and then I took this stud off. And where they are is right here on the front corner of the block. That's what holds this harness and holds the ground that I tucked up here already. Anyways, I got it tucked up right here right now. So now, I tuck my light back up here out of the way. So now you can see, you can get to the sensor very easy. Right there. All right, we got our new sensor in and plugged in, all tightened up. I'll show you the combination of what I used to get up in there. So this is what I used to break it loose and tighten it up. This is a Snap-on MV71. This is probably like my favorite ratchet out of all of them in my whole entire toolbox because it's so handy. A standard depth 8mm socket, and then when I went to put it back in, it's hard to get, if you have bigger hands, hard to get your hands in there behind the AC compressor. So I just adapted down from my 1/4 inch to my long, I guess that's a 12 inch 3/8 extension. I have my swivel here with that same 8mm socket on the end of this, and that way I could stick it down outside here and use it to get the bolt hand started up in there, know that it's right, then tighten it up, plug it back in, and it's as simple as that. So now we're gonna put our ground wires back on, tighten the hanger back up on the stud with the nut, and then crank it up, give it a try again. If this doesn't fix it, then we know that we have a harness problem for sure. All right, guys, we are back next day on the excursion. We had an emergency fix on a guy that helps me out here a lot here at the shop. His wife's vehicle was down, so I spent most of the day helping him out get that back on the road. Jumped back on the excursion because it's driving me nuts. So we did those 2 sensors like I showed you, easy fix, or easy replacement rather, to do that, both of those, and rule those out totally as being the problem. Put them in, drove the truck, and got a mile or 2 down the road. It was driving fine. First time I get on it, cuts out. Doesn't shut off, but cuts out until you let your foot off the accelerator and get back into it. Every time I would get on it, it would go back to doing that. If you drive it easy, I couldn't make it reproduce the problem. So he's got a tune on here. So I took the tune off, set it back to factory settings. It didn't do it as bad. So what it was doing the first time before I removed the tune also is I would lose sync every single time momentarily when it would do it. So once I took the tune off, put it back on the factory setting, it didn't lose sync near as much. It was doing it way less for whatever reason. I don't know why, but I'm losing sync. So let me show you that real quick here. I don't even have to drive the truck. You can rev the truck up and you feel the dead mist cutting out. Almost sounds like it's hitting a rev limiter when you're not even near the rev limiter. So let me show you that real quick and then show you what I have pinpointed now as to where the problem is. So we got our Thickum sync pulled up. I just had battery voltage pulled up just for fun to make sure we didn't have any kind of craziness with that. And engine RPM right here. There it is, right there. I did not take my foot off the accelerator. All right, I'm back off. I'm gonna accelerate again. There's the miss, and it cut back out. You say I lost sync there for just a second. So I came back scratching my head with this because what I didn't mention also was earlier we had pulled the wiring harness up from the cam sensor and got the harness all the way up from the crank sensor. And we went through it. I did not remove the aluminum foil sheathing because none of it looked broke on it. But we checked all the connections, checked the plugs, dielectric greased them, everything, made sure everything was good going down to both of those. Wiggled it around with it running, could not make it reproduce the problem. So I came back, scratching my head again. I got a little bit rougher with the wiring harness. Let me show you what I found here. So like I said, the one going down to the cam sensor and the one going down here to the crank sensor was fine. I could not make it reproduce the problem. But when I do this right here, right there, every time it'll cut off. So what we're gonna do now, I'm gonna pull the air intake off. I'm gonna get this wiring harness right here exposed and see if I can't find a break or a chafed wire. And I'm assuming it's gonna be right here under this air intake where this gets pinched down here tight all the time because it makes that tight turn right here going back over to the PCM. So let's see what we got. We got our pigtail in from ProSource for our cam sensor here. I'll pull this out of the package here in a minute and show you how long the lead is for it. So we are unplugging our cam sensor again. I'm probably not going to be able to show you unplugging it here from the top, but if you just reach down here behind this coolant hose, you can barely feel the tab and unplug it. So I got it unplugged now, so now I'm going to fish it all the way up here so we can get to that that whole harness that runs down there and get into our main harness here. And we're going to solder it all and splice it all in, heat shrink it, and wrap this harness all back up, and we should have this thing going. So now we've pulled our harness all up, sitting here. We've unwrapped all of our tape that was all around this joint right here, this T and the line. I'm gonna try to show y'all this bend right here. So if you look right here, there was a really tight bend in it. And that is right where, when I was videoing, you push down on this harness and you get it to cut off. So the wires are probably just broken inside the insulation here. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this pigtail. I got it out of the package. Now you can see how much lead it comes with on here. which I've just laid it out, and it works its way all the way back up into the harness on over to here. So we're gonna cut this all the way over here with the full stuff on it and work it all out of the harness. So what I try to do, if you look right here, let me get this out of the way, where this tape is right here, you can move the sheath here, which this has this full sheathing in it. It'll slide inside the tape. So if you can leave stuff like this, it keeps your harness kind of laid out the way it's supposed to be laid out, where you're not wondering, having to figure out exactly where to tee this off again. So like I said, we're gonna cut it and fish it through all this, and then we'll rewrap the new pigtail and fish it through all this. And what we're gonna try to avoid is putting any tight bends in it like this right here that can cause problems. So I'm gonna get this cut. I'll show y'all where I cut it at, and I'll try to show you fishing it out, and then we'll show you the aluminum, the full wrapping and everything, wrapping it all back up, putting it back in here. We're gonna wrap this all back up with some good test tape and get it back together. All right, so this is about where your aluminum sheathing is going to start. And if you can tell, before you wrap it back, you can't tell what color these wires are. They've gotten hot, they've been soaked in oil and grease and everything else over time, but you have a red and you have an orange. If you're looking at your plug this way with your clip that locks on the bottom, red will be on the right, orange will be on the left. So we're gonna do our repair right there. So you can see there, let me zoom in. We have an orange and a red. Now there's a third wire, which is a ground, that comes in contact with this aluminum sheathing here. So we're gonna have to reconnect that wire also. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna cut here. We're gonna peel back just a little more this way. We're gonna pull this all out of the harness, this whole pigtail, and leave this all together and go work on it on the table. That's the easiest way to preserve this aluminum sheathing and reuse it. We'll reconnect our ground, reconnect our orange and our red. We're gonna make sure that they're oriented, because what you have here is two different colored wires that come with this pigtail. You can get this that'll come with two black wires sometimes. This is from Pro Source Diesel. It comes with this yellow and green, however. So all we wanna make sure of is that we're connecting our green to the red back there and our yellow to the orange back there. And we're gonna have it all rewrapped and ready, where all we gotta do is make that connection, wrap it back up best we can, do the test tape on the whole harness, wrap it all back up right, and get it back together. So we got our harness on the table here. We got our new harness here, and you can see this had a break in it right here. I'll say it had a break in it. This electric stuff was not wrapped good here. I'm wondering if we're gonna see where someone else has repaired this before, but this is coming off pretty easy here on this end. And like I say, our whole goal is to preserve this aluminum full wrapping so that we can reshield this. The thing to do on these tape wraps, just real carefully use your box cutter and cut that stuff off, razor blade, whatever. The further you get up in this harness, on this end, this tape is not near as brittle. And you'll have to work a little more at getting it off. Down here at the bottom, it's been exposed to so much heat. It just kind of falls into pieces like that. We got all that off, and you can see our full here. You can see where it had some of these tight bends where I kind of straightened it out. We're gonna see what kind of shape that wire is in. So now I'm gonna real carefully work on getting all this full wrap off so that we can reuse it. You can see it's not really wrapped around it like tape. It's like one long giant piece. It's kind of like wire loom almost. You just kind of lay it open and real carefully take it all off. There you have it. So if you see right here, this is where your ground wire comes down, and it stops about this far from your pigtail. And it just makes a loop and wraps back around the wire itself. So now we're going to take this off and wrap it around our new wire here. All right, so we got this laid out here, and since we got different color wires, you have to make sure you orient your wires correctly. So laying our plugs down here with our locking tab at the bottom. It's hard to tell on this end, but green will be red and yellow will be orange. You can see it a little bit easier, a little bit further up. Green is red and yellow is orange. I wrote it down, so that way you know you're gonna wire it up right way instead of backwards. All right, so we rewrapped our ground wire. I gave myself about 1 inch of leeway here just to make sure we got more than enough wire. It's okay for it to be about 1 inch longer. We terminated it down here, rewrapped it, and it did have some tape wrapped on both ends holding the ground wire. So I did the same thing. So now I'm gonna straighten that shielding all out, make sure it's nice and flat, start laying this wire in it and wrapping it back around it. There we go. Same distance from the plug, all wrapped back up. I wrapped the ends where it terminates down there. There's a couple little spots where it could have been twisted just a little bit tighter, but it's all covered up. So now I'm gonna wrap all this with tape, and then we're gonna feed it back through the harness, and then we'll do our soldering. And there you have it. We're all wrapped up, nice and tight. And the way we wrap this, I should have videoed it, but I laid the pigtail in on the table here. I covered it with this rag. I just very gently held it to the table. Didn't take much force at all. Lee held it pretty taut without pulling too hard on the wires going into the plug. And we wrapped that up nice and tight. And that just wrapped that full wrapping around there even tighter, because I wrapped in the right direction to pull the full even tighter around it. So now we'll get up there and solder, and we'll have this thing going. All right, so we're back up here on the truck. We got it fed back through. I left this portion here for the exhaust back pressure sensor so that we knew that loom would stay there just like that. So now this is just a little too fat with my test tape to fit through this one that I left, but we have this bend right here to clearly mark it, so I'm just gonna cut that real easy. We're gonna pull the wire back by, and then I'll retape there. To keep that in the exact same spot that it was, we got our loom all put back on the end here, already taped on the end. We put our clip back on that holds the harness right down there by the exhaust back pressure sensor. So I'm gonna keep pulling this through here. Tape here, we'll get it worked all around the harness. I'll probably put a loop or two of tape in here to hold it all in place exactly where I want it. And then we'll get to stripping our wires and soldering everything together. All right, we got our harness all run where it's supposed to be. I got my vice grips holding the 2 wires there, ready to solder the first 2 together, red to green. Then we're gonna go orange to yellow, and then we're gonna solder our ground back together. And I have my heat shrink right there behind, right there where it's gently clamped with the vice grips. So don't ever forget to put your heat shrink on. So solder all those, put our heat shrink on, wrap it all up nice and neat, and then finish wrapping this harness all up, put the rest of the sheath back on it, and we'll be ready to give it a try. All right, we're all soldered up there. Now we're just gonna wrap it up nice and neat, and crank this thing up and give it a try. All right, we're all wrapped up. It takes a little bit of time. It's hard getting in here around the harness, but just make it look nice and neat. So this is where we started. This is all old stuff, but we started here, wrapped all that up nice and neat, got the main harness all tight. Our repair is right in here. We got our cam sensor wire running down there nice and neat. It's clipped on right there, as you can see, by the exhaust back pressure sensor. Got that holder put right back in the right spot. We're all plugged in. Let's give it a crank, make sure she cranks up. I'll put everything else together. We'll drive it and make sure she's good. All right, we're gonna take her for a rip, see what she does. All right, so as y'all remember before, we would be losing sync when we'd be driving, and this problem would start. Even if it wasn't showing, you'd see sync bumping from 0 to 1, back and forth pretty rapid. We've had it sitting there running, warming up. Lee ribbed it up some, Hadn't lost sync at all yet, so we'll see what happens while we're driving. I think we got her fixed. Been driving for how long, Lee? 15, 20 minutes? Yeah. We put the EcoBeast tune back on it because I had put it back on stock tune, just eliminating that as a problem while we were doing this initially. So she's running great. He wants me to check the front end out, says the steering feels a little bit sloppy. So we're gonna look at that tomorrow, but as far as the big problem here, we got it fixed. Running pretty good. Hey guys, hope you enjoyed the video on this excursion on putting a cam and a crank sensor in it, just to rule those out, showing how to do that, and then getting into this wiring harness and putting that pigtail for that cam sensor on here, which was way cheaper than that harness. I think it's $750 for the harness from Ford now. And I called the other day and they're about 2 months on back order. So got him on the road quicker, got him on the road cheaper, fixed the problem, that's all there was to it. So if you got that problem, hook up your computer, see if you're losing sync every time that happens. See if your RPMs are dropping out also. So you can look at your RPMs and your sync, see if you're losing them while you're driving it. It's Automatic Garage signing out. Check out our other Powerstroke videos. On our page, got a lot of 7.3 and 6.0 content, a little bit of 6.7 stuff. Check out this other murdered out excursion we got to work on, just got dropped off tonight. We got to see what's going on with it. If you're in the West Tennessee area or near the West Tennessee area, you're looking for somebody to work on your Powerstroke or your Ford, go check out our website, automaticgarage.com. You can hit us up that way if you're interested in us doing some work for you. So we'll holler at y'all later.